I'm asked all the time what I do to protect my investments. What are the strategies I implement to combat against all the things I talk about on a daily basis and over 2,000 plus videos in circulation at AMTV? The economy, 0% interest rates, this artificial manipulation at the Federal Reserve, the bailouts, the consequences of all the stimulus and artificial manipulation. What kind of strategy do I have in place for my family? What am I doing to protect our future? Well, one of the things I do is I invest in precious metals. I take 10% of everything I earn and I buy gold and I buy silver. And the company I trust that I do business with is Goldline. These are things you should already be doing, but if you're not, you need to pick up the phone right now. You need to click that link below. Visit Goldline. Download a free investor kit. Tell them Christopher Green of AMTV sent you. Act now. Get your family's financial future in order today. Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television. It's Wednesday, September 16th, 2015. In today's video, you'll learn what happens next when the criminal Federal Reserve begins to raise interest rates. The answer is nothing. You see, the Federal Reserve will never, ever meaningfully raise interest rates. Now, I actually kind of think that they might symbolically this month in September. In fact, even the polling being done by Wall Street pundits and money managers, there's like 50% of them roughly that think that Janet Yellen might in fact raise interest rates. But again, the interest rate hike will not be a hike. It'll be symbolic. They'll maybe move 25 basis points, maybe move 50 basis points, but that really isn't meaningful. That's not normalizing interest rates. If they move 3%, then that would be normalization. That would be a shock. That would be something to talk about. In fact, many of us, including myself, would change our tune. You see, the Federal Reserve can't raise interest rates because they've created a larger bubble than what we had in 2008 and 2009. This thing is absolutely enormous. It is huge. And the only way to step back from that bubble, the only way to delever, is to have a collapse, and a very, very meaningful collapse. Again, it will be far worse than 2008 and 2009. But this doesn't necessarily mean you need to hunker down and live in your bunker and, just live in fear. I find a lot of people within the prepper community, myself included, they seem to get pushed down by this weight of fear. They think that they don't have control over their own lives, that they can't take action. It doesn't mean that there's not opportunities. It doesn't mean that the world's going to come to an end. Yes, things can get very bad. They can get very ugly. We can hearken back to the days of World War II with the escalating global war that is knocking at our doorstep right now. There can be poverty, there can be famine, there can be disease, all of these things. But it doesn't mean you don't take action. It doesn't mean that you live in fear and you let the ruling elite dominate you. Isn't that the whole point of this development in our consciousness, in our way of thinking, funneling through the bullshit of this propaganda machine that makes up the control structure of which we live today, to break free of those chains mentally? We talk about it all the time, how nothing's changed in thousands of years. We're all slaves. We have the illusion of freedom here in America. We have the illusion of democracy, even though it should be a constitutional republic as it was founded by our founding fathers. This illusion that we vote for the next president of the United States, when that's not true. It's set up through an electoral college, which is, again, decided by the elites. That we have any say in the matter of how we live our lives. The mortgages that we take on our homes, the car loans, this access to credit, for college education, all of these things is built into the system they created for us at a very early age. You go to school and they teach you to recite things from rote memory. But you notice how they don't teach you critical thinking? In fact, critical thinking skills are punished in the public school system. How dare you think out loud? Question authority. Question history. Remember, the person, entity, the country that wins the war writes it history. It's history. I'm sure history would be written a lot differently if the Nazis had beaten the Allied powers. Beaten the United States. It would have been written completely differently. Critical thinking, something that Americans lack. Failing to ask these questions. We need to deconstruct what's going on in the world today. We need to point out the flaws. We need to point out the problems, the hypocrisy, the criminal activity taking place on Wall Street, on Capitol Hill. You know, we've talked about for years the bank bailouts, a direct result and consequence of these financial engineers creating the largest bubble in the history of man for a reason, so the banks could profit. And then when they had to delever and they intentionally popped the bubble, they stole from you in the amount of trillions and trillions of dollars. Motivated you through fear that the world was going to come to an end if you didn't bail them out. Didn't ask, put the proverbial gun to your head and just took. You see, that's real power. That's how the system works. You know, we think in the U.S. presents countries like China and Russia like those are the totalitarian regimes. That, you know, China has a lot less freedom than America. You can't say things. They'll just, get rid of you. They don't have as much of a free speech platform. But again, that in and of itself is also quite an illusion. You know, one of the reasons people speak out, people like me speak out, people like you speak out and share these videos and interact within this community that's really not underground, it's now mainstream, is because we want to prevent some of these things from happening. We want to prevent the takeover of a totalitarian regime here in the United States. Again, we fought kings and queens. We declared a revolution, our independence in 1776, so that the people had a fighting chance. It's one of the reasons why we value freedom of speech, and that's protected by the Second Amendment through guns. Because without the guns, we can't protect ourselves. You know, Hitler, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but said something along the lines, if you want to take over a country, the first thing you do is disarm its citizens. So why do you think Obama, and why do you think it's been Obama's primary agenda over the course of his 2 terms, to take away the guns? Anytime there's an attack, anytime a child dies, it's all about saving the children and taking away your guns. Because again, this is a hijacking of the once great nation, our once great constitutional republic. It's important that we think, not just internally, but out loud. That we teach our children critical thinking skills. That we push them to question authority. That we push them to question the official narrative. I mean, isn't that what a true media should be about? Again, all forms of media are propaganda, and that has such a negative connotation. People hear the word propaganda and they think that's evil or something. Well, if it's propaganda, it must be bad. No. Propaganda in and of itself isn't necessarily bad. Propaganda can be a good thing. Again, all forms of media are propaganda. AMTV is propaganda, but we're propaganda for truth. We're propaganda for critical thinking, for reality, for questioning authority. Not just citing things out of rote memory, or just because CNN and Fox News tells us it's a certain way, that it must be a certain way. Just like they used to think the earth was flat, but then that turned out to be false. All these things. We need to question authority. We need to question our government that continues to lie to us. Again, when you dig down the rabbit hole and you see how deep it goes, and you study the historical facts, and you even study recent history, all you see is the government continually lying to our faces, continuing to feed us bullshit. Whether or not it's our entrance into Vietnam, I discussed this yesterday with the Gulf of Tonkin, false flag, now through declassified CIA documents, we know was a total farce to basically galvanize public support to send us to war into Vietnam. Or it's September 11th and the post-invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, 2 countries that had nothing to do with the attacks, according to our own government. Again, you're not getting all the information, folks. Building 7. How did Building 7 collapse? How did it melt to the ground? A plane didn't run into it. It just fell down minutes later. How is that even possible? I mean, we don't even have to study when steel melts, at what degree. We don't even really have to do much investigative work, although there's plenty of people that have, to just put 2 and 2 together, connect the dots, and realize that that just doesn't happen. That it doesn't make sense. I mean, I used to live in Washington, D.C., supposedly the most powerful place in the world where our government sits, and they used to tell me things. Our professors at George Washington University used to tell us things like we had the tightest airspace in the world, that we could scramble a jet at the speed of sound. And a few years later, we had September 11th. We allegedly had a plane, but really probably a missile, hit the Pentagon. There was even a commercial, a small plane, like a Cessna or something, that landed in the White House lawn or something a year or 2 while I was there. It's all a lie. It's government propaganda. It's mainstream programming. It's mind control. Again, indoctrinate the masses at an early age when you're a child. Have you ever noticed some parents let their children watch TV? They'll be bouncing all over the walls. It's like they have ADHD or something, and they'll turn it on the Disney Channel and they'll shut up. You'll just see their eyes and mouth stops moving and they'll just watch. You think there's something wrong with that? You think there's a hidden meaning there? You think there's a hidden message? Do you think there's propaganda coming from the boob tube? As we let it play and impregnate our minds in the background while we're eating dinner, this commercialization of our society. Buy, 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 buy. Fear, 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 fear. Sex, 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 sex. You just prey, corporate America does, just preys on our innate emotional states, what's been built into the back of our brain. I mean, why do we sleep at night, for example? Well, we go to bed, we sleep because it was probably a survival instinct. I mean, if you didn't hide under a rock or sleep in a cave or something, some big ass animal would come out and eat you. I mean, all of these things are built into the makeup, into our DNA of what makes us human. Yet now we are allowing, and the people continue to allow the ruling class and the ruling elite to dominate us through these mediums, through this power structure that makes up the mainstream media, government, politics, the money system, the criminal Federal Reserve. You know, if there's one thing to focus on, there should be tremendous focus on the Fed, a private criminal entity that has far more influence on the quality of our lives, not just here in America, but around the world, that sets things like interest rates, that helps fuel these gigantic financial bubbles that results in events like what we experienced in 1929, with a stock market crash that resulted in mass poverty and famine and a world war over the course of arguably longer than a decade before we broke even. We experienced this in 2008 and 2009, but they loaded the gun again. The rubber band shot back really quickly because they knew how severe things were. Again, they've got to keep the masses drinking the Kool-Aid, buying all these fancy cars you're seeing on the street, making sure that the housing market is liquid. You know, all those fix and flippers are out there flipping homes. You know, they've got to keep the masses, the herd, moving the same direction. The minute a single individual, maybe you out there, maybe it's me, points out, hey guys, they're leading us to slaughter. Let's go this way. And the herd begins to fragment, there's trouble. Let's say people decide not to take out mortgages anymore, that they won't buy into the credit system, that they won't step into their local too-big-to-fail bank to buy a home. Let's say they start doing things privately, or they form communal communities and they bypass the system. Notice how there's a tiny house movement, especially true and especially popularized in the millennials, in the millennial population. One of the reasons why is because, you know, let's face facts here, folks, a lot of the youth in this country can't afford a house. You know, they're coming off a student debt of several $100,000, can't find a job. They figure out that was a lie, and they're expected to buy a house when a median house is like $300,000 or something like that. They can't afford it. So, of course, they're looking for an alternative. They're doing something new. Hence the tiny house movement. You know, pay $30,000 cash and put it at the back of your pickup truck. All of a sudden, there's no mortgage, there's freedom, and you can live your life. We see this with food. And I haven't even studied this as intensely as some of you probably have. There's been countless documentaries on this, how they're poisoning us. They're giving us cancer intentionally. And then they're not curing it intentionally. Make Americans fat. Give them disease. Then air a commercial through the mainstream boob tube that makes up the propaganda machine that is mind control today in America and around the world, and get you prescribed on all these medications from all these multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies. Keep you on the drip. Then you get cancer, then they'll have you go through chemo, be like $15,000 a bag, and if you don't have the money, they'll let you die, but if you do, you'll live. I mean, look at Magic Johnson, for example. I mean, supposedly the guy has HIV, right? But it doesn't break out into full-blown AIDS. Why? I've even seen this guy in person. I've seen him in Los Angeles several years ago. Guy's healthier than I am. Why is that? Well, he's got money and he's got access, and all of this is treatable. for the rich. And now we're entering a pretty magnificent state in modern society where the technology is taking over. We hear people talk about this. People talk about the singularity. Ray Kurzweil talks about this, one of the heads of Google. Technology is taking over. The AI is taking over. Now the AI, smarter than us, is making these decisions for us, making the decisions on behalf of the ruling class and the ruling elite that has created the AI, impregnating our mind with these memes and concepts that are spread. Again, play on the human emotion of fear and greed. But you notice how nobody ever talks about love? One of the other things built in innately into our core as a human, something that is quite emotional, that doesn't have a lot of reason, that at times isn't rational, but is arguably probably the most rational thing, an emotion, love. It can be misconstrued. They can use it to sell the lie that makes up this migrant crisis. So then again, it forces the collapse of Europe and the United States. It accelerates it so that they can offer and integrate the world into the New World Order paradigm, which has been the agenda from the very beginning. Of course, it could be misconstrued. We see this happening now. Save the children. Save the children. Destroy your country. Let all the migrants come in, even though 90% of them aren't from Syria. But save the children. Look, there's a child dead on the beach. Let's just get rid of all laws and open up the borders and let them come in. Even though these people, of course, are searching a better quality of life, not all of them are refugees. They should have to go through normal channels, etc. But nobody ever talks about love, how love can change everything. You know, if we just look each other in the eye and we accept people for who they are, of all races and colors and creeds, religious backgrounds, political, sexual, identity affiliations, all of a sudden things begin to change. I mean, what if we could just bypass the current system that exists? We could bypass this funny money criminal Federal Reserve system. We could bypass the mainstream media boob tube by turning it off. We could turn off our politicians on Capitol Hill. We could take back our country. We could take back our respective nations. People say that a single person can't change things, yet we've seen this countless times through history where a single person actually changes things. Again, that one person, maybe you, maybe a friend, maybe somebody you shared this video with, is the one person to break from the herd and change everything. It has a ripple effect. It's like water moving. All of a sudden, the human consciousness is raised. There's this awareness that we've never had ever before, and things change dramatically. It's like a supernova. All of this possible. Anything is possible. Again, we manifest our reality. We manifest our destiny. What we think is who and what we are. It's what we become. All of this, again, an illusion. The only thing real is what you think about, is what you do, is what you embrace through your passion and unique skill set and your challenging of authority. You have to understand human psychology that most people want to be controlled. Most people live in fear, succumb to fear. Most people want to be comfortable. They'll choose comfort over their own freedom until it reaches the point where it's uncomfortable. Well, I have a question for you. Are we not getting to the point where the great majority of us are becoming uncomfortable? That the actions taking place at the highest level and law of the land, whether Washington, D.C. or Wall Street, are becoming uncomfortable, where our livelihoods and our comfort is being challenged by the state? Is it not time that we address this discomfort and we do something about it? We realize that we have the power. The financial elite, Washington elite, the supreme power that rules over us, they're fearful of this. Again, the masses in unison have much greater strength. It's one of the reasons why the agenda is always to divide us through racism and hatred and all these events to divide and conquer the people, because if the people actually unified in a meaningful way, they would overthrow their respective governments and leaders. There's nothing wrong with the foundational principles of America, it's that it's been hijacked. And the people that hijacked it want to maintain the status quo. They want to maintain their power, so they divide all of us. But what if we begin to bypass these traditional channels, like we're doing already through alternative media, like we're doing through meeting with friends and family in your local neighborhood, or basically just thinking out loud and having a critical thought? What if we begin to bypass all of these traditional mediums? What if the people take back their own God-given power? What if we begin to act, organize, communicate, unite? And what if we do it from a place of love? Not vengeance, not hate, not fear, not greed, but love. Could change everything. Everything could change. We all have that power. I have that power. You have that power. Your friends, your family, your country has that power. Just listen. I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere, make it viral, hard-hitting in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.